Police Canine Radio. Rich, what's going on?
What's going on, man? You've been traveling a lot. You were down in Southern California, and those folks that don't understand California, I guess we don't understand California, but don't understand the geography. You can drive from the northern end of California to the southern end, and it'll take you a good 12 to 14 hours. So it's a big state. When we talk about you going down to Southern California, that's no small task. What were you doing down there?
Yeah, so got a call from the Riverside guys. They've been coming up and jumping in our basic handler classes. Great group of handlers, great dogs, good unit. And I was scheduled to go down to be a judge, and then they called and they said, "Hey, you good with being the trial master?" Because the previous individual that was going to be the trial master wound up getting bit by a dog. I think that's a long story behind that one the week before. And I go, yeah, I don't know what a trial master is. We don't have those up here, but sure. And then I quickly realized
that's like a decoy with no suit.
The trial master means, yeah, you're the guy most likely to take a live bite because essentially you are on the field with these dogs and you're basically proctoring as you go, right? You're supposed to be able to settle disputes and things like that, but these guys ran a tight trial. There was no disputes. Everything went really smoothly. They've obviously done it a lot. I think this was their 27th or 28th annual. So, yeah, it was a successful trial, and I mark a successful trial like I do a successful training, and that is we all leave with the same amount of holes that we arrived with. So, we did
a good
that.
sign. Although you ended up in the stands at one point.
There was
a little rodeo
clown
action.
This handler claimed it was a German Shepherd. Yeah, it was something other than a German Shepherd. It was. I heard there's some handlers from Mexico. I heard them saying something about chupacabra. It wasn't their dog, but they were observing it. And that thing, yeah, when he came off one of the bites and turned around, I wasn't playing any game. I was like in a rodeo because it was down. It was like in a rodeo setting, and I just went up and over into the stands, and I was sitting with the judges for a second, taking no chances. You know, it's I've been around, I've seen some things, and so there was no way I wanted to be going home in bandages.
Nice, good move. Yeah, it takes a little wisdom to know when to leave the field, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I tell you what, overall, great group of dogs down there. I was impressed with the drive, the control. They did their obedience routine. There was a guy in a suit, and they had to do hand signals around them and recall past them and pat them down and all that stuff. And the vast majority dogs did an excellent job. Shout out to the guys from INUKSHUK County. Say they're up there listening to us on those cold dark nights up there. And Quinn with Canine Rudy, got to finally meet him. And the hospitality was great. Like I said, the way they ran the trial, obviously experts, professionals. So all around great time.
One thing I saw in that trial that is commendable is they did the shedding drill. The dog was on a bite with the jacket. Decoy shed the jacket and went straight to hidden sleeves, which is, I would say, pretty advanced for a trial and nice work to see.
Yeah, to do a shedding drill into a hidden that you don't see that very often. So that decoy was out there just taking hit after hit after hit after hit and did a great job. So. Yeah, like I said, all around, great job, good dogs, well-run trial.
So, speaking of decoys, Phil's gone. Phil's about 3,000 miles away doing his thing.
Yeah, in Florida, Jacksonville, and they are having the Ring Sport Nationals. So he decoyed for the regionals, 2 regionals, West Coast, East Coast, and now he's decoying for the Nationals. So hopefully he comes home in one piece. I know it's just send after send, and they're doing those 100-yard sends. And he texted me and said one of them was supposed to be a call-off that wasn't. And so those are always the dangerous ones, right? Because the decoy is just standing there, trying not to draw the dog in. Dog's coming in 30 miles an hour. Last second, he's got to make a last-ditch effort to try to catch the dog safely, not hurt the dog. And in doing so, sometimes you hurt yourself.
Yeah, and I know we weren't planning on talking about this, and I think we'll end up doing a podcast covering some of this, but you just had a decoy class, and if one thing I think we could say to folks, like if you're out there as a new decoy or new handler, there's no need for a 100-yard straight send when you're just practicing. Like obviously we want to know that our dogs have pursuit, but you can have the decoy dip around a tree or go around a car or around an outhouse, something like that. There's no need to catch a 100-yard send more than once. And I don't even know if there's really a need to do it once.
No. and we've had we've had handlers, actually we've had agencies have dogs injured by other trainers in which they were doing that 100-yard send, and it looks flashy. It's one of those things where everybody feels good about it or whatever, but at the end of the day, you want your dog to be safe, and you want your decoys to be safe. And we just got done wrapping up a decoy class as well last week, and we did long sends so the decoys could feel what it feels like when the dog is bearing down on them, get their timing down. But we took some steam off of them, and again, that was the safety of the decoy, safety of the dog. There wasn't one decoy that went to the ground, falling on top of the dog or twisting an ankle or we've heard nightmare stories about dogs breaking teeth and everything else. And it's just with everything we do in canine, you always go, what's the risk? What's the reward? And it's just not worth the risk to injure a dog or one of your handlers or decoys.
And I'm sure you and I can both fall on this sword. In the beginning with my first dog, man, we were sending that dog all over the place because it was fun and it was 100%. Cool and didn't know any better. And it was fun to watch. And I remember a few times watching that dog hit the decoy and getting jammed up because the decoy's timing was off. And I'm like, cringing. And I might have caught a few dogs inappropriately with a big long send and didn't have the timing down. And you're like, man, I totally just jammed that dog's neck. That cannot be good for a dog. And they, especially high drive dogs, they don't care. They'll keep doing it to the detriment of their own health. So.
Well, like I heard a trainer say in the Netherlands, the dog's only got so many long sends in them, right? And so every time you do that, it's like I feel like you're taking a little bit away from them, potentially their working career. And as you guys will see, as your dog gets older, when they hit that 7 or 8 year mark, it's like, man, they're freaking perfect. I got them dialed in. They engage on the street. My control's good. The dog at that point in time, gets along with the family. He's the all around dog, and it's like the golden years, right? Then you've got that dog for maybe another year or two before they retire out. So you just try to get as much time with them as possible, and you want them to retire comfortably, right? You don't want them to be retired and be all arthritis in the back and all that other stuff. So
you mean all like us?
Yeah, like exactly. I think
too many long sends for sure. Well, speaking of old dogs, that takes us into new dogs, and I know we've been wanting to get to this for a while, but we are going to do our best to cover all the aspects of you're getting your new canine and how you should introduce yourself to the dog, introduce the family, what you should be doing with the dog when it first shows up. Pretty much the first, week or so of like, I've got this dog, what should I do with it so that I'm not creating conflict, I'm not doing dangerous stuff, and I'm not losing my dog running down the street, chasing the jogger that goes by. So let's get into that.
Sure. And we're just starting another handler class. We do 4 a year. And there's always this time period between when the handler gets the dog and they pick them up and then they start the basic handler course. And I've always worried about that. Like I'll usually talk to the handler, hey, do this, do that. So this podcast is designed so that anybody that's getting a dog or anybody in your unit that's going to be getting a dog, hey, have them watch this. It's going to be a half hour, 45 minutes of information that could potentially save somebody getting bit, could potentially, save something from going wrong or the dog getting injured or whatever, or the liability on the agency. Because, as soon as the handler takes that dog, there is liability within the agency. So if you're a supervisor, you really need to make sure that you're giving some training, because if anything goes wrong, you guys are on the hook and they're going to say there was a failure to train if there was an incident.
Absolutely. And I think you and I do a lot of these things the same. And we are in a situation where we get a lot of dogs. I think right now we did the numbers yesterday and we have 32 dogs that we've raised or brought in that are on the streets right now working. So we have a pretty good understanding of how to deal with dogs as they arrive at our place. And for us, and if everybody doesn't know this by now, we do primarily pet dogs. We train a lot of pet dogs for owners that send their dogs to us, but we also do a lot of police dogs on the side. And it starts the same.
Sure.
If you send
how many police dogs did you sell last year?
17.
There you go.
17
Okay,
last year.
so you've had a lot of police dogs coming and going.
Yeah, I mean we're no Von Lick, we're not Adlerhorst,
No.
but we definitely understand the intake process and we understand dangerous dogs. I'll be honest, we get some dogs from Eastern Europe and they are a handful. If I could give a region where the dogs are coming from that they're a little bit more of a handful, they definitely raise those dogs to be extremely drivey over there and a little less respectful to the handler. So that's something that we're aware of. But we treat every dog like we don't know them. Because we don't, we want to find out kind of what's going on in there and we want to establish some type of rapport with the dogs. And the easiest way to do that is by hand feeding the dogs. And for us, the first week of bringing a dog in means we're just sitting there, hand feeding the dog, taking what they would normally eat in their bowl, grabbing a handful of that, loading a marker. So saying, using the clicker or yes, and giving the dog food. And we're just sitting there doing that. If we get eye contact, we get eye contact, but I'm not bringing out a tug. I'm not bringing out a toy. I'm not doing anything that I have to. And I'm clearing the field. For us, I'm making sure there's nothing out there that the dog can get. No sweatshirts laying on the ground, no tug that happens to be laying over in the corner of the grass, nothing like that.
So let's start this out for the average handler. So he gets his canine car that morning, drives out to the kennel, and they load a police dog up into the back of the car. And then the sergeant looks at him and says, "All right, kid, don't do anything dumb. We're going to see you in 2 weeks." So we're talking to that handler right now. What do we need to tell this handler? What does he need to do in the beginning, and what are some pitfalls, and how are we going to make this successful?
I think we start with management. And I know a lot of the agencies out here, it's a requirement that when you get your dog, there's a kennel in place, you have a crate, a kennel with a roof on it, because some of the biggest mistakes or accidents that happen is just due to poor management. Hey, I put my dog in the kennel. The latch was kind of funky. The dog got out. Or, hey, I just found out this morning that my dog is a climber and he climbed out of the 6-foot kennel and I went outside and he met me at the back door. Or I tried to put him in a crate and there was a big fight, any of those things. So management is the first thing. You have to have a secure kennel to put your dog in so that when you're sleeping, taking a shower, eating dinner, hanging out with the kids, you're not worrying like, I wonder if he's still out there. That's a big deal. Management and having the safe confine for your dog.
Yeah, so now's not the time to be cheap. So get yourself a good kennel and make sure you have a latch on it in which you can lock the latch so the dog can't flip it open. And you could just get the end of a leash and put it on there. But be careful of having a leash hang there because some of these dogs are like convicts. Like anything they can reach through the kennel, they'll grab it, pull it in, and then they'll gnaw on it, ingest it, right? Now you got a vet visit. As a new handler, you want to be off the radar. You want to be like, hey, what happened to Rich? I don't know. Oh, that's right. He's got a dog. You don't want to be the guy that's on the radar that's constantly having problems or, your dog is getting injured or, you accidentally inadvertently bit somebody or you got bit yourself. So set your house up so you're ready to go. Don't skip on a crate. Get a good crate. Some of these dogs, they come from overseas, and I've heard stories of they're en route from the airport to the vendor, and they break out of a crate like they're escape artists. And so don't go to like PetSmart and get the cheapest, flimsiest crate you can, or go to Tractor Supply and get the cheapest kennel. And like Rich said, make sure they have a roof. As far as a bowl goes, we've seen some people be pretty creative, but really in the first week, if you do what we're telling you, you won't even really need a bowl. But I would suggest not putting a plastic bowl or any kind of bowl that they can destroy because, again, they're alone in there. They got some time. They're anxious, right? They don't know you. They don't know their environment. And so really take time and prep the environment. Dog beds, don't recommend them. It'll be short-lived. It'll be a nice chew toy for the dog. He'll appreciate it for about the first 5 minutes until he ingests some of the stuffing, and then you're off to the vet.
Absolutely. And for us, like you said, the bowl, again, for some of these high drive dogs, you go out there and the dog has a mouthful of bowl and the bowl looks like some kind of piece of tinfoil that's been wadded up and thrown in the trash because the dogs just tore it up. Actually, I'm going to throw Brian Ferguson under the bus. He's sent a couple dogs my way that are very, very bowl driven. And apparently it's a genetic trait. I went out there and he has a couple older dogs that no longer get bowls in their pens. And as what he taught me is we put concrete in a bucket and then we push the bowl down into it and then we remove the bowl. And then that big concrete block became the dog's bowl because that's the only thing that it could live with appropriately, which is not fun. But you're right, that bowl can absolutely become a toy, especially for a high drive dog. And now you're out there and you have to choke your dog off of a bowl. That's silly. So one less thing to fight with. I think that's the outlier. I don't think we see a ton of dogs that are fighting over the bowl, but in the beginning, if it's one less thing that I don't have to deal with, then we're in a better space.
Yeah, and the theme of this podcast is the dog doesn't know you, you don't know the dog, so you need to prepare, and we need to build a relationship. Rich already mentioned it. If you're going to bring your dog and take him into the backyard, make sure there's no balls laying around from your other dogs, or any toys or anything he could think is a toy, because once that dog grabs it, and some of these dogs we choose have such high drive for the toy that he now grabs this toy and you have to get it from him, and already we could have a potential conflict. And that's the theme of this podcast, is we want to reduce the conflict, especially in the first week. It's all about building a relationship, building trust. And now this dog grabs this ball and you're like, oh crap, he's got it. And now you got to get the ball from him and he doesn't know you. And so just remember, we've used this saying before. I use it all the time. Discipline without rapport equals rebellion. So if you think you're going to get this dog and go, well, I'm going to show him who's boss, and you're going to start cranking on him, that could go one of two ways. Either number one, you're going to start shutting down a softer dog, or number two, you're going to create a problem in which this dog is going to come back. He's going to come up the line. He's going to grab you. And now you got a really big problem, because now you're getting bit by your own dog in your backyard. And it has happened. And again, I don't know the dog. You don't know the dog. So I'm going to assume the worst until I know the dog better. And so take all of these precautions.
Absolutely. And that's where food comes into play, is most dogs, most dogs are hungry. And if they're not hungry on day one, they're going to be hungry on day 2 or day 3. We're going to hold out. We're going to wait until, and if your dog is super spicy, offering the food through the kennel, right? Like, see where we're at, make sure the dog is hungry and excited to take the food from you. Hopefully you've done something on the selection process that your dog's a little cool just hanging out with people, and you've picked a dog that kind of wants to be around people and is somewhat friendly. Doesn't need to be overly friendly, but friendly enough where I can just engage with the dog, and this is where the food starts. If the dog eats 2 cups in the morning, I pour that 2 cups into something, whether it be a treat pouch, a bowl, something like that, and I keep it out of the dog's venue so it's not able to reach it, it's not able to steal it from me. I reach in and I just start marking. For us, it's good, give the dog food. Reach in, good, give the dog food. Pretty soon that marker becomes valuable. It could be a clicker, it could be yes, it could be whatever you use as a marker. But I'm just saying that word and then giving the dog food. The dog doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to sit, doesn't have to lay down. Nothing has to happen. I'm just loading a marker and giving the dog food. And pretty quickly the dog starts to stare a hole in your soul, because it's like, man, give me the food. It's using all its drive that it has for toys, anything else, and it's aiming it towards the food, and then you become very important to the dog.
Yeah, it's called existential training. So, and I don't know if you caught it. What Rich said is basically whatever you're going to feed the dog for the day, put that in a pouch, have that on you, and that's how he eats that day. So whatever I have left at the end is what I'm going to throw into the kennel or the crate when it's time, when we're done our little session, and he goes in, he starts to eat the food. I shut the door and I walk away. And that's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to make the conditioning going into the kennel a little bit smoother, because there's something in there for him and you're not forcing him into the kennel. And then number two, dogs that get separation anxiety, a lot of the anxiety builds as the handler's walking away from the kennel. If you scatter a bunch of kibble into that kennel, they're eating. They look up and you're gone. And that can kind of reduce some of that anxiety. So there's no buildup. And then one thing, and we didn't mention this on the front end, on our YouTube channel, we are loading the first 7 days of a dog named Astro that I had gotten about 3 years ago now. And I basically just did a little docu-series of what I did with him every single day. He was a Hungarian dog that came over with zero training, doesn't know sit, doesn't know down. I had no relationship with him. We chose him because he was very high drive, and we just kind of do a step by step. So that'll be a little bit more detailed, obviously, because I think each one's like 20 minutes, and there's a series of 7. So we're going to upload that if you guys are interested in doing a little more of a deep dive. But the important thing here so far is have your environment ready before you get your dog. Come home, have treats. And in the beginning, there was nothing that Rich mentioned about like, oh, I'm going to show him who's boss, or I'm going to start giving him corrections. It's very much the opposite. It's just teaching the dog that you have value. You're setting the foundation for the relationship. And here's what we tell all our guys. Hey, the first week or two, I don't care about obedience. All I want is I want you to develop a relationship that we can, when you hit the handler class, we're up and running and there's trust, and the dog actually likes you. And think of every time you're giving this dog treats, you're putting money in the bank, because later on you may need to make some withdrawals, and you want to make sure that relationship is sound.
Yeah, and for us, just to clarify, when you say treats, for us that's kibble, and we use. No surprise to anybody, we use INUKSHUK, and the reason why we use INUKSHUK is, for us, when dogs come from all over the world, we get them from Canada, Tennessee, California, Holland, Slovakia. I have no idea as a group what those dogs are showing up with as far as diet goes. Some of them are a bastardization of some type of raw diet, which just means they're throwing some chicken out to the dogs to eat. Some of them are on some kind of kibble that we can't even get in the United States. Some of them are on a kibble that we don't use. So for us, the easiest transition that we found is going straight to INUKSHUK. It's rare that we have dogs that have any GI problems after they switch to INUKSHUK. It's a cold switch, so we can go immediately from one food to another with the INUKSHUK and not have any downside. And we just start hand feeding the dog its calories that way. And like you said, I guess the biggest issue we want to avoid is conflict. And if you might be big enough, strong enough, spicy enough to get in there and want to choke your dog off of something or fight your dog for something, and that might indicate to you that your dog is a strong, formidable dog. But when my dog's out working, the last person I want my dog having conflict with is me. So like you said, I'm making deposits into that bank of trust, and I'm letting the dog understand, like, hey, there might be some bad things that happen in life, but I'm the guy that's hand feeding you. When those things start to go bad, remember who's on your side. And that food means a lot to a dog. For young dogs especially, they go from breastfeeding and the relationship they have with mom. The only way we can replicate a relationship like that is giving them the calories that they need. So I know we're kind of beating the dead horse here about the food, but we see so many mishandling of young dogs where the handlers get out and be like, hey, I really want to try this toy thing, and it looks like fun to play tug, and it is fun until the dog doesn't want to let go. And I can assure you, a lot of your vendor dogs that come from Europe are taught to not let go of that toy, because the vendors want to show a huge amount of drive and possession for that. So when you're testing the dog and you're like, oh man, that dog hunts like crazy, and it gets that toy and it's really exciting, and the dog's doing a great job hunting, that didn't happen by accident, and that is propelled by the vendor who really wants the dog to show well. So you're not going to get a dog that's like, oh sweet, I'll spit the toy because you asked me to. They're going to hang on to that because that's what they were taught to do, and it looks good in testing. So first day, now it finds the toy, and I got to be out there lifting my dog off the toy. Settle that all back down and just get him to take some food. And then later on, we'll go to 2 toys of the same. But in the beginning, just the food.
Yeah. And so just remember from the dog's perspective. So, he was with a family potentially in Europe, goes to a broker. He's there, comes to another broker. Now he's with you. He doesn't know you from Adam. So he doesn't know he's your police dog. He doesn't know that you guys are going to spend many years together. So really take that time and just work on building trust. And so, and that brings up another thing, Rich. So first thing we do, we get home, we kick him loose in the house so we can go meet the family. Go run with the other dogs.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One, the other dogs thing is way down the line. And family, the introduction to family isn't like you just brought home your Cocker Spaniel puppy from the pet store, right? Like you brought home a dog, and I think it's Ted on Working Dog Radio says this, that, you bought a dog to bite. Don't be surprised when it does, right? Like, we know these dogs are prey driven. We know they like to bite. We know what kids like to do. They like to run through the house and look like prey. So now we're setting that up for failure. And there's a good chance your spouse may not be completely excited about the process of bringing this high drive dog into the house. And then one thing goes bad and you've proven your spouse right. So we're going to remove all of that. Let the dog get used to you. Let the dog get used to your home. Let the dog get used to those smells and everything that goes on. And at some point we can start having the family feed the dog through the kennel, those kind of things. But operation number one is not meet the family. Absolutely. That is, we'll save that for later.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, we all want that dog, right? That's like the family pet, and then he goes to work and he catches bad guys and he comes home. The reality is most dogs aren't going to be of that temperament, and you don't know what you have. So for the safety of your family, and for God's sake, the safety of your pets and everything else in the house, living in the household, don't unleash that dog in the house. Don't force that relationship. The dog has to get comfortable with their environment, comfortable with you. Now we have trust. And now, like Rich said, the way we introduce the family is go out to the kennel. You can use a marker and throw in some food, or they could walk up, talk to the dog quickly, throw the food into the kennel, turn around and walk away. And just develop that association of like, hey, there's other people around the house are actually pretty cool. They're productive. They got food. But it kind of starts a foundation for a relationship, but it does it in a safe manner. For the integration of the dog into the house, and that's a whole nother subject. Like, there's a lot of trainers that believe that's a big no-no. And then we get pictures on Instagram all the time of the dog laying on the couch. I think it really is dog dependent. And so not knowing what dog I have, we're going to err on the side of caution. And if that dog ever does transition to the house, it's going to be done over a period of months, if not years. But one of the things that we want to talk about is where's that dog sleeping at night, Rich? Like, what are we doing with that dog? Is he going to just be in the kennel outside the whole time, or are we going to?
So there's a couple.
Bring him in the house?
There's a couple upsides and downsides to both, right? If I leave my dog out in the kennel, and I've seen, especially in the middle of the country, if you go to LEO Canine Discussion, there's always hey, what kind of kennel did you build for your dog? And there's some of these cool contraptions that are kind of a shed that's attached to an outdoor kennel, and they have heating and insulated water. Some of the things that we don't necessarily have to worry about in the valley, right? Like we don't have to worry about this hugely insulated building, igloo type thing that houses your dog. But if you leave your dog outside, then there's never any concerns about, is the dog going to do anything inside? Is it going to piss on the couch? Is it going to, grab the curtains and go running with it? Is it any of those things? So there is some value to that. But we found that the dogs find some comfort and quietness, which is nice, inside the house crating. So when we bring dogs in at night, we bring them in specifically to go into the crate and sleep there. One, if there's a mess, if the dog does have some kind of gastrointestinal issue and gets sick, it's kind of confined to the crate. If they're doing something in the middle of the night that sounds different than all the other nights, which oftentimes could be a sign of bloat or some kind of discomfort, I can hear that in the house. I know that, like, there's a problem. I need to check it out. And the big thing is having a dog that crates just makes life easier. You're going to take your dog to some training somewhere that requires them to crate. You're going to travel somewhere where you may not have your patrol car crate. If mouths especially find ways to hurt themselves in unique situations. So if that dog goes to the vet and it requires some kind of calmness in the crate to guarantee that it's going to recover, that crating is nice for that. So we really push hard to try and get the dogs to crate in the house in the evening and overnight.
Yeah, and one of the issues we have with a lot of new handlers is they put him outside, and then what's the dog going to do? He's going to bark. So if you're a new handler, you have to prepare yourself for that. He doesn't know where he's at. He just got there. He feels you leave him in the crate, or in a kennel outside. There's no other dogs. Generally, there's nothing else going on, and they're far away from where they grew up, and they're nervous, they're scared, so they're going to start barking. And right out of the gate, now you've got a problem with your neighbors. So also on this, talk to your neighbors before you get the police dog. Let them know you're getting a dog. Let them know that it might be barky in the beginning until it settles in and you find your routine. But by bringing them in, and like Rich mentioned, like bring them in, putting them in a crate. Number one, the barking generally is non-existent. They're inside, climate controlled. They're safe. They're not doing anything destructive out there, and it just makes a transition smoother. And then for my dogs, I brought them inside and put them in a crate, and then I observed them in the crate, right? So if I've got kids and they're running around, right, and I've got, obviously, I'm not talking about a 2-year-old that's going to stick his hand in the crate, but I can also observe my dog's behavior in that environment. And if I have other dogs, they're in the crate, I can kind of observe how they behave in that crate later on. But a lot of our guys bring the dogs initially in. They'll either put them in the garage in a crate, or they'll put them in a washroom or a crate or something like that. But I don't really recommend leaving them out in the kennel. I just think it's the dog is going to bark, and now we're forced to put a bark collar on the dog at night. And be careful with the bark collars, because if you go out there and you're taking the bark collar off and the dog's excited and he starts to yip and he gets a little stim from the bark collar, and you're taking the collar off or you're up around him, sometimes they will associate that, and the pain will induce an aggressive response. So, if I don't have to use a bark collar, I'd rather not.
Yeah, and keep in mind that most of the bark collars are based on some kind of vibration. So you have a bark collar on and a prong collar at some point. If that prong collar hits the bark collar, you're liable to get a response from the collar. If your bark collar hits the metal bowl, you're liable to get a response from that. We use bark collars all the time, but you have to be aware of what makes them work and what you can do to set them up for failure. And speaking about collars, and prong collars, especially choke collars, fur savers, any of those, your dog alone inside of a kennel with any kind of a collar that has action, like a choke or a prong, anything that slips, will create an absolute opportune time for your dog to get it hung up on something and create some major trauma in your kennel. So make sure you take off any kind of corrective collar before your dog goes into the kennel, because your dog will find a way to get that hooked onto something, or even another dog for that matter, if they're in a free play area. So all those corrective collars have to come off before you put them in the kennel, for sure.
Yeah, one more thing too that you can do for your dog, if like in our training group, we like to use the muzzle quite a bit, and it doesn't hurt to actually put some kibble in a muzzle and get them start used to putting their nose in and start eating out of the muzzle. If you're going to have this dog for like a week or two, that's kind of a productive time too. Just start creating a good association with the muzzle.
And there goes your marker, right? Like every time the dog sticks its nose in the marker, good, gets food. Good, gets food. And again, it can be click, it can be yes, whatever your marker is. Don't sleep on the marker. I know we haven't talked about the marker in a long time, but this is a prime time. You're going to be hand feeding your dog for every bit of a week. Throw a marker in there. Later on down the line, when you're working your obedience, you're going to wish you had the marker. If you don't understand the marker, there's 9 million YouTube videos out there about it. We've talked about it. You're going to see it in the videos with Astro. And I don't think you know this, Greg, but when we get pet dog handlers, owners that come to us and they've just pulled a dog from a shelter or a pound or something like that, we have them watch the Astro videos, because getting a dog from the shelter is almost identical to getting a dog from overseas that has no training, no relationship. You go get a dog from the shelter and it is a straight up crapshoot as to what you're getting. So we're telling those people the same thing. Start your relationship with hand feeding. And then that's how you should treat your police dog. You should treat it like you don't know anything about it and it's dangerous. Because that's what you want.
And be aware of the situation you put yourself in. You go outside with your dog. I'm not laying on the ground with my dog. I'm not putting myself in a position where the dog can get on top of me. If I sit out there, I'm sitting in a chair and I'm not letting them climb on top of me, because we've seen dogs where you go, oh, look, this little fella's being affectionate, and he climbs on top of you, and then you're like, all right, buddy, and you go to push them off, and they're like, no, I don't think so, and now we've got a problem, right? So, just be aware of your positioning. I'm always staying on my feet initially. Hey, and then for you agencies out there, you should go through whenever you give a new dog to a handler, take a few minutes and just show them how to take the dog off a bite. It's one of those things where hopefully you never have to use it, but showing how to use a breaker bar or how to get a lift off could be needed. I mean, let's face it. We hope it doesn't. You don't need to, but again, I'm pretending like this is the worst dog in the world until he until he shows me different. So I want to have at least a contingency.
Yeah, I got a question for you, and I don't know the answer to this, so this will be a fresh one. When you were a kid, did your parents teach you when you met a new dog to stick your hand out in its face so it could smell your hand? Would you?
Yeah,
you remember doing that?
I was taught to roll it up in a fist, so if they bit you, they didn't pull off a finger.
Yeah.
You stick your fist in their nose.
Let's start passing the word to everybody in the dog world. That's not how we greet new dogs. Hey, new police dog that's been trained to bite. Here's a target for you. If when people meet the dog, just have them ignore your dog. The best thing they can do is act like furniture and have your dog treat them like furniture. And this again, pet dog, police dog, it doesn't matter. In the beginning, I don't want people running up to my dog, putting their hand out and saying, "Oh, I love dogs. I'm friendly." And then they give the dog a target. And if you greeted us like that, if somebody ran up to me and put their hand in my face, I'd back up. I'd be weirded out.
Mm-hmm.
If I had my back to a wall, I might come forward. Let's not put dogs in a position where they have to figure out what all that means. Just ignore the dog until the dog accepts you. We're not pushing ourselves on any dog.
Yeah, and like Rich, whenever we're dealing with a nervous dog, let the dog approach and initiate the contact on their own versus us forcing ourselves upon them. So that's a good tip. So, Rich, we talked a lot of things so far, and this doesn't go just for patrol dogs. We've had a couple instances with our single-purpose detection dogs, the cute little labs that everybody's like, "Oh, it's a cute little lab. What's the worst that can happen?" Well, let me tell you. And matter of fact, I'm going to recap a couple things that have gone wrong at home, so we don't all make the same mistakes. I think a lot of times in law enforcement, we learn more from our mistakes than we do when there are no mistakes, but yet we don't like to talk about them. It's one thing you're going to find on this podcast is we like to talk about our mistakes. We don't like to talk about it, but we just don't want other guys to make the same mistake. So we had a single-purpose lab that was living in the house and was sleeping on its bed, and the 9-year-old daughter decided to say goodnight, and the dog ignored her, so she did what a 9-year-old would do. And I'm not blaming the 9-year-old. I'm blaming the handler for the lack of supervision, putting the 9-year-old in that situation. The 9-year-old climbs on top of the dog, in which the dog says, "I don't think so." Bam. And then tagged her right in the face. And so she's fine, not disfigured, but could have been. And I think what you guys need to realize is, in the dog world, a bite is simply sometimes just like a quick correction. The mother grabs the pups, boom, shakes them a little bit, like knock that off, and they do that to each other. They play that way. Their necks are designed for dominant struggles. They're tough, right? That's why we have collars on them. And so the dog might be just telling the kid, like, "Hey, back off." Like there's no bad intent. They're not trying to seriously injure the child, yet that's the result, because obviously their skin is pretty pliable. So that was one. Another one happened when the dog was laying on the couch. Same thing. When dogs are sleeping and they're in their environment, they don't want to be disturbed, and they normally wouldn't disturb each other. And so dogs tell us a lot of things, and we just don't perceive them. We don't pick up on them. And so the handler, like, "Man, it came out of nowhere." And it's like, chances are that dog was telling you long before that child got bit that he was uncomfortable. And so again, as a new handler, we're not expecting you to be able to read your dog or read these signs. That's why you don't put them in these environments.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand, especially with a single-purpose floppy or a dog, where you might give them the benefit of the doubt because they're cute and like, "Hey, my agency doesn't want pointy-eared dogs for searching for things. We want a floppy, friendly-eared dog." Floppy and friendly don't necessarily coincide, and you still are picking that dog because it's drive, it's possession, it's hunt work, it's through the roof, right? Like, you don't want kind of a passive lab. You don't want a passive Cocker Spaniel. You want one that's out there hammering it. So we know, because we've seen, we have a little Springer Spaniel that we sold a couple of years ago that beat up two of our Dutchies because the Dutchies were between that Springer and a ball. So it's what those dogs are saying is like, yeah, I am for the most part a good dog, but if you get between me and the shit that you bought me to find, like you bought me because I'm so excited to go get that thing, I'm still in drive. So they're not thinking clearly. And like you said, we have daycare, we have dogs that run around together, and the fights always happen teeth to neck because dogs have loose disconnective tissue here. You can pull it all around, no harm, no foul. Kids, wives, you don't have loose disconnective tissue. Well, I mean, you and I might at this point in our lives, but there's not a lot of loose disconnective tissue hanging on people. So when they get bit, it immediately ends up in stitches. Dogs get, pulled from the handler, put down, those kind of things. Just limit that connection between your dog and the family until you understand what's going on, and don't treat them like your house pet. They're not. If you're sleeping on the couch and somebody comes and startles you, you might wake up swinging. You might wake up upset, but you can verbalize that. Your dog can't verbalize that. Their teeth are how they verbalize what their problems are. So don't put them in that situation to screw them over.
Yeah, and to do service to the dog, just give them their own space. Like, they want to be left alone. And again, that's where the crate comes in. It's they have their own downtime. If you want to take it back to the wolves, it's like their own little den, and that way they can feel free from not being potted or blah. I was saying prodded or poked. So it's like, just give that respect to the dog, and then also really just for the safety of your family, make sure you don't put that dog in any situations that those things are going to happen. Again, the biggest thing that you want to think about is you want to be off the radar, no problems. And by doing that, you can tell the theme of this podcast is take it slow. Don't push it. You have plenty of time to socialize, quote unquote, with your family or your other dogs down the line, way down the line. Don't feel the necessity to do that in the first couple of weeks. It really isn't until the end of the handler class that I see teams come together and guys really start to know their dog. And by that time, they've usually had the dog for at least 2 months. If you are going to socialize dogs down the line, Rich, you want to tell them how to do that?
Well, the ideal way, if say you have a dog at home and you get a new dog that comes into the house, is let them live in close proximity to each other. So ideally, you could have a crate that's relatively close to another crate. They both go in, they both sleep there, they get food there as time goes on. Let their kennels be close to each other, unless they're fence fighters. If that's the case, then we have to figure out something to separate that. We usually use some kind of hard barrier so they're not fighting through the fence. As time goes on, we switch their crates, put dog A in dog B's crate, dog B in dog A's crate. So they're like, hey, I'm in your odor. I can smell what's going on, but we're not making the dogs touch, right? They're still not engaging with each other. Then at some point we start walking. We walk down the sidewalk. The handler's healing the police dog. Another family member is healing, the pet, and they are walking parallel. They're not allowed to touch each other. They're not going nose to nose. It's just like, hey, we work in the same vicinity, but we both have our own responsibilities. Little Fluffy over here responds to mom or dad, and then the handler has the police dog. They walk parallel. They don't touch. Weeks, if not months down the line, as we're walking parallel, we let them touch nose, and we immediately bring them back into a heel, just so we can get a feel like, hey, are these two dogs cool together? Do they hackle? Do they stiffen up? Tails go up, ears go back, any of those kind of things. If they show any of that, then it may be that my police dog never gets to hang out with Fluffy. That may not be the case. If they start to be kind of cool with each other, they've been in each other's crate, they've eaten next to each other, they've walked parallel, then we can start doing some meet and greet, but that's limited before we ever cut them loose in the backyard and hope for the best. And when I finally get to the point where I decide, I think they're pretty cool, and I do cut them loose in the backyard, I'm standing out there like a boxing referee, and I'm not letting anybody get away. Any kind of stiffness, any kind of hackling, any kind of growling immediately gets met with correction from me, so the dogs understand I'm running the show. But man, that is months down the line. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm creating my own relationship with the dog. This does not happen on week one by any means, or month one. It doesn't even happen on month one.
100%. Cool. All right. Everybody got it? Go play with your dogs. Go cut them loose. Let's see how they are in the house. Let them run with the kids. Let them run with the dogs.
One last thing, and you brought it up. Just keep in mind A lot of these dogs come from a kennel background. So you let them on the couch or you let them on your bed. That is incredibly valuable to a dog that's never laid on something soft and comfortable. And it sounds to you like, hey, I'm just trying to integrate the dog into my world. I let him on the couch. I let him on the bed. And then you walk out of the room and a family member says, hey, you should probably get off the bed. They're as possessive of that comfort as they are a ball, as they are a suit. So your spouse goes to push the dog off the bed or tells to get the dog off the bed. You might have created the fight of a lifetime for that dog that your spouse had no idea was about to take place. And your dog's like, bullshit, you ain't putting me off the bed. I don't know you well enough. We don't have a relationship and I'll fight you for this spot. And there are stories of that have happened. And sure. EMTs showed up and, like it's not a good thing to put your dog doesn't need to be on the couch. Your dog doesn't need to be on the bed. I get Christmas photos and all that, but find a better way. It's not necessary.
There's all kinds of AI type stuff you can do right now, right? For they'll Photoshop your dog into the family picture. Yeah. Nobody will know the difference. Put a little Santa hat on him and stuff like that. We can do all that computerized.
Just be safe. Use common sense. Assume your dog, your canine, is going to do something that you don't want them to do. Be ready for all that. We'll go down the list again, everything that we talked about. Management is a huge thing. Roof on your kennel. A crate that's safe for your dog. We're not putting them in, like you said, the $50 Tractor Supply kennel. They're going in a Gunner or a Dakota or an Impact, something like that can keep them housed. We're not letting them run around with the kids and the wife and do all that and assume that that's all going to go well. We're going to hand feed them. We're not going to show them a toy right out of the chute that we have to fight them for. Use some common sense. Develop a relationship with your dog. Discipline without rapport equals rebellion. If you start having to kick your dog's ass on day 2, without having a relationship with your dog, be prepared for a fight, and your dog owes you one for that.
I think we wrap it up on that one. Well said.
In the meantime,
train hard.
And be safe.
Don't let the dog in the house until you know him really well.